And it's time for our pre-show for today's 220-1101 Core 1 A Plus study group. Hello, everyone. Welcome aboard. We're just getting started. I'm trying to get things in order here. Just trying to make sure everything is ready to go, as we got about 10 minutes, now less than 10 minutes before we get started. Okay, things appear to be working okay. We've got screens up, camera's good. We are recording here. We are streaming there. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Watching the chat room go by right in front of me, right there. I'll move you over to this window when we get things started so that I can see what's going on. I think we're in pretty good shape here. I'm just watching and waiting as these things come through. Yep, everything looks good there. I've already done the podcast intro, so that's done. We can close the nice window that YouTube put up for me. We'll close that and pause that. Okay, everything looks good. Hey, chat room. We've already had folks checking in from Massachusetts and Barbados and other locations. New York is here. Welcome. That's we got a lot going on this week. This is a busy week. We have, if you aren't aware of this in the scheduling, we don't often do this, where today I'm doing a Core 1 study group, tomorrow doing the Core 2 study group. They are back to back. So if you're interested in either one of those, you've come to the right week. Morocco is here, and Atlanta, and Zimbabwe, and Dubai, and Costa Rica, and Jacksonville. Finally. Got some folks in Florida. Vegas is here. Pittsburgh is checking in. Thank you, South Africa, for being here. Cameroon, Arkansas, South Africa, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Tacoma, Canada is here. We have family in Canada. So I always have to make a mention to tell Mrs. Professor Messer that Canada checked in. There's New Jersey. We've got Crawfordville. There you go. Just down the street. Toledo, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Pensacola. We got there. It's going by so fast I can't keep track. Montreal is here. Baltimore, Miami is here. Tampa. A lot of Florida folks checking in. Thanks for being here, everyone. Brent already checking in with the $4.99 super chat. What's that about? Thank you, Brent, for that. Don't even have. Let's see. Do I have a graphic up for that? I think I do. There we go. No, and isn't pulling in. Now I need to update my graphics because it's not even pulling in your there. That one pulled in, but not you, Brent. You're special. All right. Well, we'll figure out the details with why people's heads aren't showing up there. But thank you, Brent, for the super chat. That's very kind of you. We've got a lot to go through today. Today is all Core 1. So if you are here for Core 1, you are in the right place. And then we've got Core 2 tomorrow. So it's a busy week. And it's because there's other things. Normally, I would do Core 2 on Thursday. So this is, it's just the chaos of my life has required me to do other things on Thursday. So I just cram them into the next 2 days. We're just going to go through them. But I've already got the content ready to go. I wrote these on the 1st. So I have all of my live stream content for the month ready to go. You just can't see it until the live stream is here. So that's the real key. Oh, Brent says in the message he put, didn't get to type my message. You helped me so much with my A Plus, Network Plus, and Security Plus. You're amazing. Thank you again. Well, you're the one that got the certifications. So you're actually the amazing one. I'm just hanging out and helping you through the process as much as I can. So we're glad that helped you a bit. I'm so glad to see people when they get their certifications. Some folks are getting 1 or 2 or multiples of those. It's really great when that happens. And we always like seeing that. It's one of those where now it's captured. Now other people are able to see it. They're able to see the success that others are having, which I think is... it just seems to work. It's very synergistic. Everyone wants to be part of that success, and it's success that you are creating for yourselves, which is even better. 5 minutes to go. 5 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. We've got 5-minute warning up, and we'll get started. This is the part of the show where I check and make sure everything's working. I can't say that that's always the way it goes. Today it's going pretty well. I need to check. I need to move this so I can see. You can see the 3% that's there. That's the number that is important on the cache. I need to see that in the live stream, so I have to get an eye chart there to work through some of those. So we'll have to see how things go with the rest of the live stream. But I think everything here is set up and ready to go. So I like that part of it. What else are we looking at? I think we've got about 4 minutes. We got this content ready. I guess I get the presentation. Did I even test the presentation? Let's test it and see if it gives me a green light. Does it give me a green light? It does give me a green light. So that's fine too. That's the only thing I did not test, and now I have. So here we go. Oh boy. We got a lot happening with these. My keyboard is interesting. It's not it is kind of an odd looking keyboard, isn't it? It's a wavy keyboard. This is a Logitech 8 something. Logitech, I don't remember the model numbers. Logitech somebody. I'll pull up. I wonder if I have the Logitech. Let's pull up all these crazy icons that are in my programs that are just a mess. But the Logi options are here, and it will tell me it's a wireless keyboard Ergo K860 is what that is. And that's what it looks like. That funny looking keyboard. And it's the split keyboard. It's more ergonomic. So instead of having your hands together, you can put them out at a natural angle, and it works great, which I like. And then I have the Monster Mouse, which is just this enormous sized, your entire hand sits. It's like a supersized. It's like, honey, I shrunk the network technician. And now I've got this enormous mouse that I have to work through. Here's a question before we get started. If I pass the Core 1, can I perform the Core 2 whenever you want? Yes, well, whenever you want, as long as the current edition of the Core 2 continues to be available. So they retire these exams every 3.5 years or so. So technically you could take the Core 1 the day it's available, take Core 2 3.5 years later on the day just before the exam is to be retired, and you would be A+ certified for 3 years after you pass that second exam. That would be like a 6-year process that you just went through. Normally people take one at a time. You do have to pay for them individually. You have to pay for each exam sitting, but it is very reasonable because you can pass one exam in any order, pass the exam, and then there's just no time frame that you have to complete the other one by, except for the retirement date. The retirement date is the only important time frame for that. So another thing to go on your calendar. We got a couple minutes left. I guess I should start making sure that I'm in frame. That's good. Is Core 1 easier or harder than Core 2? Well, I guess that depends on what information you have or know already about these topics. Some people have been using Windows for a long time. Core 2 is so much easier for them. Some people have been troubleshooting hardware for a very long time and doing networking, and Core 1 is easier for them. So I guess it just depends. I think the difficulty level in both of those is very similar. So take that with whatever it means for you. We'll talk about retirement dates at the very beginning of the live stream, which starts in less than a minute. We will get started. I'm preparing for Security Plus from SY0501, but the test will be 601. Are they too different? They are dramatically different. Throw away anything that says SY0501. Do not study from 501. Do not use 501. Do not use a book that says 501. Do not use videos that say 501. Do not use quiz tests that say 501. Do not use labs that say 501. Half the exam is brand new in 601. 50%, really 51%. So it's really important that you study from 601 materials or you're not going to pass your exam. It really is statistically, that's what's going to happen. So don't do that. That would be bad. Let's get a presentation up on the screen. Presentation, green light. That looks good. That looks good. This looks good. I do think we are ready for a live stream. It's top of the hour. Let's click a few buttons here and let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 2023 Professor Messer it's the 220-1101 A+ study group. You just have to cycle through all of them until you get to the one that this study group happens to be. Today, we're going to go through questions that come directly from the 220-1101 Core 1A+ study exam objectives. We'll talk about those objectives in just in a moment, how important those objectives are, and they sure are pretty important. But I have for you in this first hour questions that you'll be able to answer online, and they all come directly from those exam objectives. The objectives themselves we will talk about in just a moment, but I also want to make you aware that in the exam or the questions we're going to ask today, all of the questions can be answered online. And this is kind of the fun part of the study group, is these online questions are available at the link you see here. Just open up a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA. That will take you to our question and answer. There's a question already waiting for you there. There's also an app that you can use. The app is called Socrative Student App. You can get it from your favorite app store. In that Socrative Student App, it will ask you for a room name. The room name is right here on the screen, Professor Messer, all one word. So not Professor Messer, all one word, but Professor Messer, and it's all one word. So PROFESSORMESSER, type that into your app and you'll see a question on your screen that we like to call our rewind question, because it is the only question you're going to get today that comes from last month's study group. And that question, as you find it on the screen, is: none of the USB interfaces on the front of a desktop case will recognize when a USB device is connected. Which of the following components is the most likely source of this issue? Is it a pin header, a eSATA interface, ATX 12-volt power, CPU speed, or out of memory? So there's a few of those there. None of the USB interfaces on the front of a desktop case will recognize when a USB device is connected. Which of the following components is the most likely source of the issue? Is it pin header, eSATA interface, ATX 12-volt power, CPU speed, or out of memory? Our standing rule, of course, in our study groups is that you answer the question with always with the online system and not in our chat room. So please, no answers in chat. Please, no hints in the chat room. We're going to go through and see if we can really find the information we're looking for through the link you see on your screen. Visit professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. We'll come back to this question in just a moment. One of the things that we like to do in these study groups is to see how much information we know about what we're doing. But of course, we're not always doing a live stream. You can always see every single one of the videos that we posted on YouTube by visiting us at professormesser.com/YouTube. We have a daily A+ pop quiz question. You'll find that at professormesser.com/Twitter and professormesser.com/Instagram. So there's plenty of ways to find out what's going on our side. This is just a few ways and a number of different things. You can also do professormesser.com/Discord or professormesser.com/LinkedIn. It depends on where you're trying to find us. So that's the secret code. If you're trying to figure out where we might be online, if something appears when you type that in, then we happen to be on that service. If nothing appears, then we're not on that service. It's really that scientific, isn't it? Now, sometime during this first hour, I will give you instructions on how you can obtain a continuing education unit credit for watching this 1-hour webinar. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. It's something that you'll have to worry about once you're certified. But there are a number of people that do stop in once they earn their certification. And whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching it on demand, you'll be able to take advantage of that. Just listen in sometime during this first hour. Also want to let you know that the A+ exams themselves have a version number associated with them. The current version is the 220-1101 and the 220-1102. These were released in April of 2022, so they've only been around little over a year at this point. They're relatively young in the life cycle of these exams, because exams usually stick around about 3.5 years. That would mean that the estimated retirement date for these exams would be October of 2025. So if you're studying for these exams right now, have a look at the calendar, make sure that you're nowhere close to October of 2025, and you're do just fine. Now, as we sit here in June of 2023, we have plenty of time to get through both of these exams so that you can earn your A+ certification. Both of these exams are 90 minutes long. On the 220-1101 that we're talking about today, you need to earn a 675. That's on an interesting scale of 100 to 900. So I'm not sure what that means in the world of how they do anything with grading on this exam. And I think that's sort of the point. It's difficult to reverse engineer that. So the important part of this is do the best you can on the exam. The final score will work out to be whatever it happens to be. You don't have much control over that. You just need to make sure that you earn a 675. And as I mentioned, as soon as you pass both of these exams, you are A+ certified, and your A+ certification is good for 3 years after passing the exam. And there are many, many ways that you can renew the certification. You'll probably never take these exams ever again. You'll simply renew your certification every 3 years and you'll do fine. So that's the important part. So everything that you see, if you see study materials and they specifically have on them the 220-1101 and 220-1102, you are using the most current versions of these exam study materials. The 1101 that we're going to talk about today have topics such as mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization and cloud computing, and hardware and network troubleshooting. So you've got quite a bit that we are going to discuss today. I'll try to pull questions from every single one of those different domains so that you have a pretty good idea of what the different options are. There's also a replay of this available immediately afterwards on YouTube, but I also create an audio-only replay that can be downloaded to your favorite podcast listening program so that it automatically appears on your mobile device or whatever you use to listen to podcasts. I also have in this same URL of professormesser.com/podcast links to Professor Messer's A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups. So they're all there. If you're trying to figure out where to go to add this to your podcast listening, that's the way you do it. And if there is a streaming service you like to use like Spotify or Pandora, you'll also find, if you search for Professor Messer there, you'll also find the podcasts will be there as well. There's also, as I mentioned, a video replay available immediately afterwards. And then about a day later, my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this, hey, Lori, how you doing? How are things? She's going through this process of watching everything, probably at 2x speed, and putting down timestamps in the YouTube video description. This allows you to go back in time to any of our study groups and find exactly what you're looking for during this admittedly very long stream of content. So hopefully that can help you as you're trying to find information. It's usually available about a day later, and you'll find it in the YouTube video description. You can see example of those timestamps right here on the screen. I also want to let you know that when we're not here live, we have a chat room that you can join. We've got a lot of people that study. This is a fantastic community that's created over on our Discord. Join us at professormesser.com/Discord and feel free to follow along with what people may be doing during their studies. If you have questions about some of the content, or if you just like to chat with people who are also performing and studying the same type of study materials and tests that you are, you'll find it on our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. Also let you know, eventually you will need to take this exam if you want to be certified. If you live in the U.S. or Canada and a number of U.S. territories, you can purchase discounted vouchers on the Professor Messer website. I mean, you could go over to CompTIA and pay full price for your vouchers. That's completely up to you. But if you'd like the exact same voucher, but you would like it at a lower cost, it's already priced lower on my site. You don't need a special code. You don't need a coupon. You don't need some type of enhancement to your browsers. No reason to add on any of those extensions. Simply go to professormesser.com/vouchers, and all of the vouchers there are already discounted. You also get a bonus if you purchase the voucher on my site. Not only are you paying less, but you're getting more. I will give you a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. I wrote this specifically for CompTIA exams based on the experiences that I have had while taking numerous CompTIA exams. They have tips and tricks for studying, tips and tricks that can help you during the exam, and it might give you a couple of extra points. And sometimes a couple of extra points is a very, very important thing to have. So that's another great one to help you as you step through these. Hopefully they can give you some perspective of what you might want to work on. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers to get those discounted vouchers. They're available to you and watching all of this. So let's go through the question I asked earlier, which is, none of the USB interfaces on the front of a desktop case will recognize when a USB device is connected. Which of the following components is the most likely source of this issue? Is it A, the pin header, eSATA interface, ATX 12-volt power, CPU speed, or out of memory? Could be one of those. Let's see what you answered for this one. As we look at the different options, since this is a question we asked last month, I like to see some improvement over the questions we had, and we did get improvement this month. 75% of you say that the answer is pin header. 14% say it's an eSATA interface, 6% ATX power, 5% said out of memory, and 1% say CPU speed. And as you probably recall from last month, the pin headers are very important. They're a little set of pins. That's why we call them the pin headers right here on your motherboard, and they connect different external interfaces, very often the interfaces that are on the case. So this is how all of those interfaces that are on your computer case somehow are able to connect back to the motherboard that's inside of that system. And so you'll find the pin headers become extremely important. And if you're in there working on your system and suddenly it stops working, or the lights on the front are no longer working, or the interfaces on the front of your computer are no longer working, then that's a really good example of how this particular issue might be one that is related to the pin headers. It's a pretty good place to go for pin headers. You'll find pin headers a lot of different places. Here's another shot of the pin headers on a motherboard just to give you some perspective. There's the different pins that are there, the different connectors that you can plug into. There are different interfaces also for expansion slots and SATA drives that are in the device. But in this case, we're really most interested in those pin headers that we would plug in to be able to find those. That is the right answer. 76% of you got that one absolutely correct. Hopefully that's one that you are familiar with already, or perhaps you remembered it from last month. Either way, it's a technology you must know for the A+ exam. And so you'll find that also in the A+ exam objectives, another important one to have. Now, of course, all the rest of the questions we're going to have will be brand new. No one's ever seen these questions before because I write them new for every single study group. And I like to start the study groups with a performance-based question. The performance-based questions are questions that are not multiple choice. The one we just had was a multiple choice question where there was a question and then multiple options to choose from. But CompTIA knows that those can sometimes be a guess. You could have guessed this one correct. And so what they've tried to do is give you a handful of questions at the beginning of the exam that are not multiple choice. So they could be anything. In this case, I have for you, it's a fill in the blank question, which technically they don't have on the A+ exams. At least traditionally, they have not had fill in the blank questions on the exam. But I think this one makes it a little bit more difficult to be able to work through. This is one that I think can help everybody. This is a question that is more of a visual one. So if you're listening in on the podcast, I apologize already that you would not be able to really see what we're doing here, but perhaps this question will help you a bit. You can fill in the blanks that I have here. The question is, name these interfaces. And I have on the screen these different interfaces. In fact, it's even sort of difficult to see one of them because my big head's in the way. We'll do this. So I'd like you to name these interfaces. We have A, B, C, D, and E. You'll see a link at the bottom of the screen, professormesser.com/QA, that you can use to answer this question and simply put in the 5 different interfaces that you believe these particular cables and interfaces are associated with. Please be as specific as possible. I may want to know exactly what version or what type of these interfaces there are. I don't want to give you any details. So we'll have a look at what the different options are. We'll have a look at what those interfaces are. And they're sort of to scale. They're not exactly to scale, but they're pretty close. I think you should be able to figure it out based on what's there. So there's the link that you would use to put in your answer. As always, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to lock in those particular answers that you might have. It's the answers that are there. There's obviously a blank slate. So you're the one that has to fill in the details. Occasionally on the exam, if this was an actual exam, I think you would probably see a question where there's matching. Maybe they'd give you 10 different interface types and you have to pick 5 of those to be able to match it. Sometimes you'll see those on the exam too. So those can be useful if you're on the exam, but I thought it'd make it just a little bit more difficult. Also remember what you submitted, because you can't see your submission once you make it in the online system that we're using. So just keep in mind what you happen to put as the answer to each of these 5 interfaces, interface A, B, C, D, and E. This might be one. I think some of these are gimmies, maybe. I think some of these are a little more difficult. You have to look really, really closely to understand exactly what's there. But there's a lot of interfaces on the exam. I only grabbed 5, but there's obviously others that you're going to need to know as well. That's why I want you to go to name these interfaces, see what you think the answers might be, and be able to lock all of those in. Got a lot of people already putting their answers in. I want to go through each one of these in detail so that you'll know exactly what these are, and then maybe we'll talk about what these are used for. When would you use each one of these interfaces? Because ultimately the exam is going to ask you questions like that. They are interested in you knowing, do you know what this interface is? But I think the answer is probably more important that you know what it does, because the questions you get on your exam will be very specific to function and how you would implement this in a practical environment. I think that throws people sometimes. I think a lot of exams are trivial. If you've taken exams where it's simply, here's an abbreviation, tell me what the abbreviation means, those are pretty normal. But you don't see anything like that on the CompTIA exams. CompTIA doesn't do anything like that. Let's see how you did with this question. The question again asked, name these interfaces. So let's see how you did with naming the interfaces. We'll start with the very first one on our list. And if you are someone who is an Apple iPhone user, you probably recognize this one immediately. But what's the name again? Well, that is a lightning cable. That lightning configuration, the one where you can plug in either in either direction. It was very unusual at the time that you would have an interface for power on your phone that it just didn't matter how you plugged it in, it would work. We're so accustomed to USB-C these days, but back when Lightning came out, we had nothing like it. So it was way ahead of its time. And indeed, the current version of phones from Apple still continue to use the Lightning connectors that will obviously be changing shortly now that USB-C has become so popular. We're already seeing USB-C on a number of Apple products. We power laptops with USB-C. We've got USB-C on the iPads. So you'll probably see USB-C everywhere to get that going. That is the Lightning connector, something you only see on Apple products. The second on our list is B. That one is, I think, the gimme. The B is an HDMI connector. We use so many HDMI connections on our consumer electronics, our televisions, our connectors that we happen to be using. The HDMI is such a common video type. We use a good bit of HDMI here in the studio. We use SDI for a number of other things. SDI is not on your test at all, of course, but it's just something we use within the studio. But HDMI is so common to see for video that hopefully you got that one right out of the gate. Next on our list is, as I mentioned earlier, we're replacing Lightning with USB-C, and indeed, C is USB-C. I didn't intend for that to happen, but it's just it worked that way, didn't it? So the answer for C is C, USB-C, to be sure. USB-C is a type of physical interface, and that physical interface can carry different types of signals. So USB-C could carry HDMI video. USB-C could carry Thunderbolt data and video. You could have USB-C could send DisplayPort data over USB-C. So that's one where it almost becomes the standard interface that we can use to send almost any type of data. And it's extremely flexible and very, very useful. And that's why I think we're seeing USB-C everywhere. And it seems everybody's moving over to USB-C to have that happen. Speaking of USB, we have this answer D that's on our list, a very unusual interface. That's because it is a USB 3.0 and higher micro B interface. Now, you could have, if you looked at this interface and maybe you only looked at half of it, you might recognize that as a USB 2.x micro B interface. That's what a lot of the mobile devices used to use for charging that were not Apple devices. So you'd have to make sure you put it in the right way, and then it would fit in there, and that's how you would charge. So most of us would carry around with us a Lightning cable and a USB micro B connector that we could use to charge other devices that we happen to have. But with a USB 3.x, where we needed additional bandwidth, it was a faster interface. Turns out the micro B interface was just not big enough. We needed to add more content to it, more information, so more hardware. So the USB 3.x micro B is what we see there. That is a micro B connector, but it's for USB 3.x and higher interfaces. We don't commonly see that on those. There were a couple of phones and other things that use those, but you don't see them really on many systems these days. Practically everyone has moved over to the USB-C. And then lastly, on our list, this odd kind of a square-based interface, but not really a square, that is a Thunderbolt. It could also be a mini DisplayPort interface. Technically, it's a Thunderbolt interface, and you can send mini DisplayPort data over Thunderbolt. We don't see a lot of Thunderbolt any longer. Obviously, very popular on Intel-based systems. It was a standard that was created by Intel. Apple did help with some of the specifications of it. But that Thunderbolt connector is one you'll still see on legacy systems, and they may be connecting it to transfer data. So you might be plugging in an external storage device, or it might be sending video signals over it. On my last computer, I had a Thunderbolt interface. I have multiple Thunderbolt interfaces like this, and one of them I would have external storage on. The other, I would have a video output. So it didn't even have an HDMI connector on it. It used mini DisplayPort, as I recall. Maybe I was using both the HDMI and the mini DisplayPort at the same time to be able to run two different monitors at the same time. So it becomes pretty useful. Those are the 5 interfaces. We have a Lightning interface commonly used for Apple mobile devices, HDMI for video, USB-C for practically anything, the USB 3.x micro B for USB related data connections, and then lastly our Thunderbolt, sometimes called a mini DisplayPort connector because that's how we tended to use it. Technically it's a Thunderbolt connector. So those are just a sampling of the different interfaces you need to know for your A+ exam. Make sure you are familiar with those. These could certainly show up on your exam, so make sure that's something that you have become familiar with and something that you can use to help your studies and know where you should put your time in so that you can recognize what these are. But as I mentioned, more importantly, it'd be really nice if you knew what to do with these. How are these used on your systems and what's important for these? Now let's shift gears back to a multiple choice based question. Let's start with multiple choice right here. This is our first new multiple choice based question of the month, and it asks, a company has configured an access door to unlock when an authorized user's phone is placed near a reader. Which of the following technologies are most likely used? Is that Windows Hello Face, PoE, VLAN, NFC, or SDN? A company has configured an access door to unlock when an authorized user's phone is placed near a reader. Which of the following technologies are most likely used? Is that Windows Hello Face, PoE, VLAN, NFC, or SDN? If you think you know the answer, please know answers in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA. That's your link on the screen to answer this question. Please no hints in the chat room either. This should be good if you're someone who's working through the details of this. Maybe you know about these particular options and what happens to be there. So again, please no answers in the chat. Please no hints in the chat. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. All of these, by the way, are real technologies. Somebody, I think, talked to me earlier about Hello Face. Like, is that a thing? Is that that's a real thing. So all of these are real things. So if you're looking at one of these and you don't necessarily recognize it, I think there would be some information there that you should be able to write down and go back to your exam objectives and find out, what did that abbreviation mean? What does that stand for? Maybe you need a little bit more details with those. So make sure you step through each one of those to become familiar with them. Now, this is a technology that we use all the time. And being able to work through them. I think hopefully this can give you some perspective of the type of technologies you need to know for the exam. And again, if you don't know any of them, go to the exam objectives. Those will help you a lot. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asked, a company has configured an access door to unlock when an authorized user's phone is placed near a reader. Which of the following technologies are most likely used? Is that a Windows Hello Face, PoE, VLAN, NFC, or SDN? Let's see how you answered this one. We'll click Show Results, and we can see nobody really thrown on this one. It seems to be a technology we have just become so accustomed to using that everyone seems to know this, and NFC got 93% of the votes for this one. And then we have a four-way tie for second place with 2% apiece on every single one of them between Windows Hello Face, PoE, VLAN, and SDN. So this obviously not a big surprise to most folks. NFC, near field communication, is what that stands for. NFC is a very common technology. If you use a watch to check out or use your phone to pay for things at the store, then you're using NFC. But of course, NFC can be used for a lot of other things as well, since it really is associated with you. And it's your phone. You have to authenticate to this phone to be able to use those NFC functions. It really is a very good way to provide some type of authentication using this third-party piece of hardware. And then you can simply walk up to the door, present your phone, and it will unlock the door. We're seeing this very commonly if you go to a hotel these days. A lot of hotels have transitioned over to being able to unlock your door based on what's on your phone. And in some cases, that technology uses the NFC, and you have to put the phone right up to the door for it to unlock the door, which I think is great. That's a very easy way to gain access to your hotel room without necessarily carrying around another key somewhere. In many hotels, I don't even carry a key anymore. I never get a key. I never lose a key. So another thing to kind of help with all of these. The answer here, indeed, NFC is what we were looking for. Windows Hello Face is a way that you could have face recognition in Windows so that you don't even have to type authentication details. You simply present your face to the camera, or you use it as an additional authentication factor. It recognizes your face and allows you access into the system. PoE is a system of power over Ethernet. That's what that stands for. So if you need to support and be able to use these, hopefully that can help you as well. Working through power over Ethernet, you can have these devices that are somewhere that a power outlet's nowhere near, but you're able to power those devices. Things like access points and voice over IP phones are a very good example of those. So I think if you're someone who is really trying to understand more about these technologies, you need to really recognize the differences between them. For example, VLANs are a way to logically separate different domains within a single switch. That's kind of nice to have. So, but it has nothing to do with unlocking or providing authentication to unlock a door. You got NFC is what we talked about. And then lastly, SDN, software-defined networking, very common in our cloud-based environments, but configuring a software-based network is not anything or has nothing to do currently with being able to authorize someone access to a room and unlock a door. the only answer here, the one that everybody chose, or at least 94% of you chose, is NFC, near field communication. That is the right answer. You got that one spot on. Let's do some more. I've got another question for you. This question asks, a network administrator suspects the WAN interface on a router is faulty. Which of the following would confirm this suspicion? Is it crossover cable, loopback plug, crimper, inductive probe, or punchdown tool? Again, 5 real things that we need to choose from. The question again asked, a network administrator suspects the WAN interface on a router is faulty. Which of the following would confirm this suspicion? Is it a crossover cable, a loopback plug, a crimper, an inductive probe, or a punchdown tool? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. As always, please, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. We'll figure out the details. And of course, if you don't know the answer, take a guess. See if you can get rid of some that don't remind you or don't have any reminders there of what might be there. See if you recognize what they are. Maybe you don't recognize some of them, and that would be a good place to start, I think, figuring out the details. Sometimes not knowing something is as important as knowing it. Probably not a watchword for the exam. It's probably not how you want to step into the exam, but during your studies, that's an important part of that. So this is a good one to go through. These are all very common. You will use all of them. And I suspect if you're doing anything related to computers and networks and security, you'll probably using all of these at some point in your career. So it's important to know what these might be used for. Again, lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA. A lot of people have already locked in their answer. So let's see how we did with this one. The question again asks, a network administrator suspects the WAN interface on a router is faulty. Which of the following would confirm this suspicion? Would it be crossover cable, loopback plug, crimper, inductive probe, or punch down tool? Let's see what you answered. 65% of you now say it's a loopback plug. 17% say an inductive probe is what would help you. 12% say a crossover cable would help you confirm this. And then single digits, 4% for punch down tool and 2% for crimper. So obviously here we did have a majority, 65% of us say loopback plug. Our issue here is with or at least we think the issue here is with a WAN interface on a router. So maybe you've done a lot of troubleshooting. You're seeing errors appear on a WAN link. They're coming in. They're not a lot of errors, but you're seeing them accumulate over time. Maybe you're concerned it's a cable, so you swap out the cable. Maybe you're concerned about a problem on the provider side, so you have them do a loopback test on the provider side. And there is your commonality there. If they can do a loopback test on their side with their equipment to confirm their equipment's working properly, you should do a loopback test on your side to make sure your equipment is working properly. And that means we would need some way to send data out of a WAN interface, but then have that data immediately return to the WAN interface and measure it to see if what we are measuring on the return is exactly what we sent on the transmit. And we would do that by using a loopback plug. Loopback plugs are different depending on the topology type. So a loopback plug for Ethernet would be different than a loopback plug for a serial WAN connection, but the concept is exactly the same. We have data that's going out and data coming right back in again. You can really see that on this loopback plug down here made for a 10100 Ethernet. Maybe that's a WAN one now that I'm looking at it. It's one is not connecting to 3. So that's definitely not a serial loopback plug, but it's a very good example of using loopback and being able to work through those different interfaces. So you might have a serial interface. You might have network connections. There are fiber loopbacks that you can use. You have a different loopback interface for different topology types and different media that you might be using. So that's one of the biggest challenges. Somebody says, let's do a loopback test of the WAN interface. Now you have to find the loopback plug, or you have to make a new one. That can be challenging too. An important thing to remember, though, that these are not crossover cables. These are connectors that effectively connect you to yourself. So you're not crossing over to connect to some other device. It's you connecting back to yourself. And can't really do that with a crossover cable because there's 2 interfaces on a crossover cable. You plug in one, where do you plug in the other? So crossover cables don't make any sense there. You need something that is really focused on understanding the details of these. And in fact, loopback plugs is exactly the one you should be looking for. 66% of you chose that one. And now you know why a crossover cable would not be the right answer. Although 12% of us chose that one, crossover cables are not used to be able to test these interfaces and be able to perform diagnostics. Inductive probes are combined with tone generators to be able to plug in a tone generator on one end of a cable, and that cable might go up into the ceiling. It might go 100 yards that way. But over back where we think that cable might be, we can use an inductive probe to be able to listen to signals that might be on that cable. It's a great way to find the end of a cable, especially when the two ends are so geographically distant from each other. So very useful to have, but has nothing to do with testing a WAN interface. You've got crimpers. Those would be used to put a connector onto the end of a cable. In this case, we're trying to check a WAN interface, not a WAN cable. So crimper is not going to help us very much because a crimper does nothing with the interface that's already in your WAN router. And then a punch down tool is used when you are connecting wires to a punch down block. In this case, we're trying to test an interface on a router. That's not going to be a punch down tool's purpose. This would only be, the only answer that really makes sense here is answer B, loopback plug. That's how you can test that interface, and 66% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. As you probably already know, these exams are extensive. They contain content from a wide array of different topics, everything from networking to security to printers to hardware to operating systems and Mac OS and Linux and Windows and many, many other in between. In fact, if you go to my entire course, it's 137 videos long, 19 hours of content. That is a lot of information to pour through, and I recognize that not everybody has the time to go through every single one of those videos. That's why I created my course notes. I take all of the text from those course notes. I take everything from what I've been using on my systems to for graphics, for tables, and I put them into these course notes. This is what really helps. In fact, let me show you what these look like. These are the PDF course notes that are on my screen. Let's have a look at these so we can really see what's here. If we go through this, you could see a big index, and it's indexed in the same order as the exam objectives, which of course is the same order as my video course. And now you can see all of the text that is in here, the graphics, the images of the interfaces and the cables that can be used, the tables and the charts that I've created. They are all in these set of course notes. Not only do I have those in a digital form, you can get them in a physical form as well. They're obviously identical to the digital. And if you purchase the physical edition, I will send you, or you'll be able to download the digital edition for free immediately after your purchase. So you can go through the digital version while you're waiting for me to print and ship this to you. So you're never going to be without the content you need to help with your studies. Those are my course notes, something that might help you. You can find out more on my website at professormesser.com/1101notes, or simply follow the pull-down menus at the top of my site to find my course notes. It also helps keep this craziness going with these live streams and everything else. It's a great way to support what we do on the site as well. professormesser.com/1101notes. Let's do another question. I've got another 1101 question here for you to work through. Here's your next question that asks, a network administrator, no, this is the last one we did. This one asks, there we go. A memory error was identified and corrected by a server's ECC memory module. Which of the following technologies provides this integrity check? Is that WPA3, DDR, parity, NVMe, TPM? 5 different technologies, all real things, all things you need to know. The question again asks, a memory error was identified and corrected by a server's ECC memory module. Which of the following technologies provides this integrity check? Is it WPA3, DDR, parity, NVMe, and TPM? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will step through and become, lock at least one of these in. See if you happen to know which one it is, what you would use in this scenario to be able to understand how this particular situation happened to occur. So that would be good. Folks in the chat room asking, what is the most up-to-date playlist for this? Well, there's only one playlist for the latest version of the Core 1 or Core 2 exams. It's in my ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube channel. And if you go there, there's an option for playlists, and you simply choose the playlist for the 220-1101 or 220-1102. There's only 2 playlists, so you can't go wrong. Pick the one for whatever exam you're studying for. That's the set that you should use. And of course, I have the entire index available on my website at ProfessorMesser.com. Everything is broken down there, so you can find everything you're looking for in that list. I think that would be a good one to understand. A lot of you have already locked in your answers. Probably not as many people locked in their answers so quickly on this one. But of course, this would be one that has a few different technologies. We really have to read through every single one of those technologies if you're planning to answer this question. You never know which one might be better or worse than another. So what it happens to be, we'll figure out the details. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a memory error was identified and corrected by a server's ECC memory module. Which of the following technologies provides this integrity check? Is it WPA3, DDR, parity, NVMe, or TPM? Let's see how you answered this one. We'll show the results. And we can see did not get a majority, but very close to a majority on this one. 48% of you say the answer is parity. 28% of you say the answer is DDR. We've got 11% that say it's TPM. 9% said NVMe. And then 3% say WPA3. Nobody decided it was WPA3. So in this case, the server has an ECC memory module. This is a memory module that recognizes when there may be a problem or corruption in the memory and attempts to correct that corruption based on some information. Let's talk about that information. This memory that checks itself is sometimes called parity memory if it simply detects the error. But if it detects and corrects the error, it is error correction code memory, or ECC memory. In both cases, both what we call parity memory and ECC memory are using the parity to determine if a corruption has occurred on that memory module at all. That's where we really get the understanding or the alert that something has gone wrong with the data because the parity is not matching. And in my videos, I go through a step where we calculate parity. So we understand exactly how parity works. If you haven't seen that, you may want to look at my Memory Technologies video on this one. Error correction code uses that parity bit to be able to understand if this has potentially been corrupted or not. And that means that those of you that answered C, parity, is the one 49% of you chose. That is the correct answer. Parity is what determines or what allows an ECC memory module to determine that potential corruption has indeed occurred, and it can fix it if the parity is something that it can reference. So that's always available. We'll always try to fix that particular problem coming through. DDR describes a type of memory. In fact, it's not uncommon to have ECC memory that is DDR memory as well. But the DDR, double data rate, associated with DDR memory doesn't have anything to do with recovering corrupted data or even knowing if any type of data may even be corrupted. It is simply a type of memory and doesn't describe the process of identifying and correcting problems with the memory. So that would not be the correct answer. It's parity that is the technology providing the integrity check. By default, DDR memory has no integrity check. It's simply memory. In fact, the vast number of desktop computers and laptop computers that you use at home are simply non-ECC and non-parity memory. It's simply DDR memory, and it doesn't even provide that special check to be able to know if the parity is correct or not. WPA3, only 3% of you chose that one. That is a security protocol used on wireless networks, has nothing to do with memory. We've got NVMe. So NVMe storage is becoming incredibly popular, not only for its speed, but its size that you would have on your motherboard. And that non-volatile memory is something that's very useful for storing data, but has nothing to do with correcting memory module data. That would be only for storage. And then finally, a TPM, a trusted platform module, also found on your systems. Trusted platform modules are commonly used for cryptographic functions. They store keys. There is immutable keys inside of the TPM so that we can confirm the system that we're connected to. A lot of great security functions inside of a TPM. In fact, you have to have a TPM if you're planning to, or the latest version of a TPM, if you're planning to run the latest version of Windows. And it's also a great tool if you're planning to do any type of BitLocker encryption. You have to have a TPM on your system in most cases as well. But in this case, we're trying to fix a memory issue, and we fix that memory issue because we are concerned about the parity on that system. And indeed, 50% of you got that one absolutely correct. We've got more questions for you. Let's get another one in. We're just going to keep this going. Next question on our list asks, a cloud-based application instance is designed to always be available to the end users. Which of the following would best describe this cloud characteristic? Is that characteristic high availability, rapid elasticity, non-metered, DAAS, or hybrid? A cloud-based application instance is designed to always be available to the end users. Which of the following would best describe this cloud characteristic? Is that high availability, rapid elasticity, non-metered, DAAS, or hybrid? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. There's the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. I have to see what that happens to be. This is probably, in fact, all of these have something to do with cloud computing. So if you know cloud computing, you understand the different options, you should absolutely become familiar with these. They are all on your exam objectives. You could potentially be asked about any of them on your exam. So if any of these technologies are unknown or unusual to you, make sure you make a note, have a look at those after the live stream is over. A lot there to be able to work through. So I think that the Windows 11 that a lot of people are installing need that TPM to be the latest version, or at least 3.0, I think, is for Windows 11. That's the one that Windows folks were realizing, oh, I need to upgrade my system if I'm planning to use that latest version of the exam. So that's a bit of a challenge, but you know, Windows 10 still runs on those older systems, so you can always upgrade later on. That's very useful to have, but it is a requirement. I certainly don't really focus on installation of Windows, but when I tried to upgrade one of my older systems to Windows 11, it told me, nope, your TPM is not something that's going to work. You're going to need an updated motherboard because the TPM that's in my system is not upgradable. So there you go. Now I have to get a new system if I'm planning to run the latest version of Windows on that computer. Just how it goes. That's the normal way that these systems often are set up, the different operating systems. And that's why I think you'll see more of a gradual Windows 11 implementation as time goes on, because as people buy their new computers, they'll get the newer operating system. They'll get a TPM that allows that. I think that's a great way to do it. So something you can be familiar with. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, a cloud-based application instance is designed to always be available to the end users. Which of the following would best describe this cloud characteristic? Is that high availability, rapid elasticity, non-metered, DAAS, or hybrid? Now let's see what you chose. The results show us that 73% of you say that is high availability. 11% say rapid elasticity, 6% say non-metered, 7%, tie practically, say DAAS, and then in last place, 3% of you say it is hybrid. So all of those, again, are technologies you need to know about. With cloud computing, it's always important to understand the point or the focus of what we're looking for. For example, if you were concerned about an application instance that was going to be used very heavily during the holidays, for example, you would need to implement some type of rapid elasticity that allowed you to immediately create more resources for users as the application becomes more used. and then shrink down to a smaller size when things slow down again. But that wasn't our problem in this question. Our problem was that we wanted this application to always be available to the end users. And although rapid elasticity does help with uptime and availability, it is not describing to us a way to always have the application available. In that case, we would want something like high availability, where systems are always going to be available because we might have backup systems that we create at the same time, so that if one system was to fail, we would have immediately another system available that could be used by the users. The users would never see any type of downtime. They would never experience any type of problem because there's a load balancer or some other method built into the application that will prevent it from ever being unavailable to the users. That is an important one if you're ever working through this and being able to understand the nuances between these technologies and understand, especially in the cloud, how the differences occur. The real point of this one, and the one that was incredibly important to understand, is this last sentence, which says, which of the following would best describe this cloud characteristic? Although rapid elasticity does talk about being able to make more application instances and shrink them down to have fewer application instances, it doesn't address the concerns of having outages. And if you're concerned about outages, you want to be sure that everyone is working on these and you never have any type of downtime. You need a system that is highly available. High availability is really the only possible answer here. Hopefully, that's one you answered. 73% of you got that one right. High availability is what we were looking for. Now, we also have these three other answers that we had. For instance, desktop as a service is one that would allow us to manage everyone's desktop in the cloud. In this case, that's not our issue. Our issue was keeping an application instance up and running, so it would not be desktop as a service. Non-metered is a way to provide billing for cloud-based services. If you're billing as you go, as you use a larger number of resources, you are billed higher. That would be more of a metered billing. A non-metered means it's a flat fee. So if you pay $20 a month for cloud-based storage, and it's a flat fee no matter how much of that cloud-based storage you're using or how many transfers you're doing, that is a non-metered service. And then lastly, hybrid, which really describes using multiple application instances, in many cases across multiple cloud providers. Sometimes it's using an internal cloud and an external cloud at the same time. That hybrid scenario is very common because many people have their own cloud-based services on their own data center, but also have public cloud-based services. And in that example, we could really describe that as a hybrid service. But in this case, we're not talking about a hybrid service. We're talking about having the application instance always available. So that's why hybrid would not be the right answer. Only 3% of you chose this one. The answer that is correct, the one that is the best description of this characteristic, is indeed high availability. Answer A, and you got that one absolutely correct. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that has a certification. It certifies that you are here to earn 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. But you have to follow these instructions to be able to earn the CEU. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a Contact Us link on my website. In that Contact Us link, it'll bring up a form. Put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put June 2023 Core 1. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, please put the super secret code word of the month, DAAS. DAAS is the super secret code word of the month. Put that on a line by itself. And then if you'd like to put anything else into that message, I do read through every single one of these that come in. You're welcome to put any other messages in there or not. Just simply hit send, and that's all I need. I know what you're looking for. You want to get that email. So that's a very easy way to do this. Again, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, put your name, your email address in the subject line, put June 2023 Core 1. In the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, DAAS, which of course is desktop as a service. And I will probably in about a week or so turn these around so that you can get a copy of these, but hopefully that can help you too. If you are someone looking to renew your certification, that's why you would be collecting these CEUs to begin with. So hopefully that can help you as well. Now we have a little bit of time left, so I think we should sneak in another question. I've got another one ready for you here. Here's a question, and this one asks, A laptop reboots automatically after a Windows stop error. Which of the following would disable this automatic restart feature? Would that be Device Manager, Performance Monitor, Event Viewer, or System Properties? There is a small section of the 220-1101, the Core 1 exam, that is about troubleshooting, especially troubleshooting a startup process or a process that is constantly restarting itself. And this question certainly sort of blends together the very few times the 1101 and 1102 exam kind of meet in the middle. So hopefully you've done your troubleshooting on the 1101, and you can answer the question that asks, a laptop reboots automatically after a Windows stop error. Which of the following would disable this automatic restart feature? Device Manager, Performance Monitor, Event Viewer, or System Properties? I tried to make it a little bit easier by giving you 4 different answers here. So you got a 25% chance, worst case, right? So hopefully you can plug in your answer, see what it happens to be. This is one where you may need to do this during the troubleshooting process because nobody likes having a message pop up on the screen and then suddenly disappears because your system reboots. So sometimes it's very important to disable that automatic reboot or restart function. See if you know what the answer is. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. This might be one you've never even seen before. It's in there, and it's incredibly important that you know where some of these more troubleshooting related options happen to be, because you'll end up using them all the time when you're working on those really difficult problems. Not every call to the help desk is please change my password. A lot of calls to the help desk deal with problems that are intermittent. There are problems that are happening. The user doesn't see what goes on the screen. So we almost have to rebuild what happened and then gather as much intel from other sources. And this is just another way to help gather that intel if the problem happens again. See, this is a specific problem you have to be able to troubleshoot from the exam objectives relating to continuous reboots. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, a laptop reboots automatically after a Windows stop error. Which of the following would disable this automatic restart feature? Is it Device Manager, Performance Monitor, Event Viewer, or System Properties? Let's see how you answered this one. And if we look at the results, 55% of us say System Properties provides those details. 24% of you, nearly a quarter, say it's Device Manager. We got 14% that say Event Viewer, and then 6% say Performance Monitor. Continuous reboots can be a significant problem when you're trying to troubleshoot, and that's why it's one of those topics you have to know about on your exam. This is one that could be related to a number of different things. Of course, you need to understand when it's rebooting, maybe provide a way to circumvent the rebooting process. Or if this is one where it's automatically rebooting, but we would really like the screen to stay there so we could see the messages that come up on the screen, we might want to try disabling the automatic restart, and that's found in System Properties. You go into the System Properties, you click on the Settings option that brings up the Startup and Recovery page, and you can decide to enable or disable the option there to automatically restart. It's exactly what you would want to use for this one. Of course, the problem may have nothing to do with the software in your system. It may be hardware related, but being able to see the error message instead of the system rebooting can be really useful. And also, by the way, this is one where if you did miss a reboot, all this information is stored in Event Viewer. So you are able to go back into the logs of Windows and pull up the information about the stop error even though it rebooted after the fact. So even if you didn't set this, there are still ways to go back and work through these and at least have some understanding of what the different options might be. So hopefully you're familiar with this option. I think a lot of you were, because 56% of you say yes, System Properties is where you would enable or disable that feature. And I think it's a good place to go if you're trying to turn this on or turn it off. This is also 25% of you said Device Manager. Device Manager, very good for managing the drivers associated with our hardware, but it's not where you would go to turn on and off the Windows Stop reboot functions. There's no option in Device Manager for that. Event Viewer, as I mentioned, option is the log viewer inside of Windows. You can see everything that happened. You can go back in time and look at all of the stop events and look at the details associated with those messages. But that's not where you would tell Windows whether to reboot or not. There's no option for that with an event viewer either. And then Performance Monitor gives you real-time statistics and metrics about how your system might be running, but it's another place that does not have an option to reboot if an error happens to occur. So that's not where you would go. The only option here that made any sense is the last one, System Properties. That's what we were looking for. And if you're somebody who is trying to get to a point where you want this message to show on the screen and you don't want the user to do anything else at that point, you might want to turn off the automatic reboot. That would be a great way to make sure that it stays on the screen and they can't do anything with the system unless, of course, they power it down and then power it back on again. System properties is what we were looking for. Now, although we're at the top of the hour, I'd like to get in one more question. I have one that we can go through. And again, this question, same rules apply. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room as we go through this. This is a question that comes directly from my practice exams. Now, if you haven't seen my practice exams book, it's one that I wrote because I just was not happy with the exams that I was finding online. If you've ever seen some of these exams online, they're really ridiculous because they ask questions that have nothing to do with the exam objectives. They have outdated questions of things that aren't even asked anymore on the exam. In fact, a lot of people will come up to me and say, these were really hard. These third-party questions I got were really difficult. I said, of course they were. They aren't even asking you the things that you've studied. So of course they're going to be very difficult because you have no idea what might be on there. They were just asking all kinds of things. So I have for you a question from my practice exams book. Hopefully this can help you. Let's step through. This is directly from the book. So I'm just going into the PDF version of it. Of course, there's the physical version of the book as well. The physical version has everything that you see on the screen here. It's just in a printed form. Some people like to have that printed book to take along with them. And same thing applies. If you get the printed physical edition, you get the digital edition for free. So in this digital edition, it's a PDF. So in the PDF, I could annotate this because it's a PDF. If you have a pen or a stylus that you can use, you can annotate. If you want to highlight things on your PDF, you can do that. If you want to select different answers on the screen or different options, you can do that in your PDF reader as well. You got different things that you can do with working through the annotations. And I think if somebody's trying to troubleshoot and understand what should you be using to study this exam, these might help you as well. I think some of these can be really, really useful. Let's go through this question. Now that I've marked it up on the screen, I think we can still read it. The question asks, a server administrator has received an alert showing one drive in a RAID 1 array has failed. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this alert? Is it replace the bad drive and resync the array? Is it replace all drives in the array and resync the array? Is it replace the bad drive and restore from backup? Or is it convert the array to RAID 0 and replace the drive? Or is it replace all drives in the array and restore from backup? So we have quite a number of options there. Now in my book, I have these little links on the side. If you have the physical book, you can simply go to the page number and it will have either just the quick answer, whether it's A, B, C, D, or E, or you can click on details. Go to page 57 or just click on it. Notice it's kind of a hot link that's on my screen. I can click the details. Once I turn off my annotation, thinks I want to annotate the details. I can click the details and it takes me automatically to that page. So it jumps over to page 57 where I have the same question and it gives me the answer saying it's answer A. And of course, I tell you why I believe that to be answer A. I give you the full description. Now, of course, when you're taking an exam online, or an exam from a third party, it's not going to tell you often why the wrong answers were wrong. And I think that's a great opportunity to learn. It's a great opportunity to understand why you may have chosen the wrong answer. So in my practice exams, every single incorrect answer has a description. So you can go through and understand, I answered C. Why is C not the answer? And you'll get more understanding about why that particular option would not apply with this particular scenario. So it's another way to kind of bring the feedback loop of learning back to, I got it wrong. Why did I get it wrong? Oh, I understand it now. And that way, if you get another question about that particular topic, you'll understand what that happens to be, and you'll be able to answer it better next time. I really think the more you get wrong on your practice questions, the more you're going to get right on the actual exam, because you've already learned that topic by going through that feedback loop that's available in these practice questions. And of course, if you read the question and you have no idea what the question is asking, which is another problem I run into, down here at the bottom, I give you a link directly to the video. I explain this is from the 220.1101 Objective 5.3 in my video on troubleshooting storage devices. And you can either do a QR code or you can click the link that's in the book, and it will take you to that video so that you can understand more about what this question even means. Those are my practice exams. Oh, and by the way, when you're done, since this is a PDF, I'll just use the back button in my PDF, and now I'm back where I started, and I can go to the next question that's on my list. So those are my practice exams. Hopefully that's something that can help you. It is a PDF format, and I made it that way so that the largest number of people would be able to use it. You don't have to have any particular operating system. You don't have to be online. You simply download the PDF and use your existing PDF reader that's available on every single one of your devices to be able to gain access to this very important information, probably one of the last things you do before you go in and take the actual exam. Learn more on my site. Go to professormesser.com/core1pe or follow the links on my site to be able to use those particular options. Well, this of course is, as we're looking at the questions we did today, every single question came from the exam objectives. So if you go to your exam objectives and you can download these, it's a PDF, so you can mark them up, you can make notes, you can copy and paste from them. These are incredibly valuable. In fact, I have a set of the exam objectives on my screen too. Let's bring up the exam objectives so you can see them. This is the exam objectives. It should be the first thing you download. It should be the last thing you list, because everything you need to know is bulleted here. Some people will sometimes show up and say, well, the Core 1 exam wants me to know 100 different port numbers. Well, it seems like 100, but no, it's just a couple columns worth. So it's about 15. It's about 20. They're not 100, but you know exactly the port numbers you should know based on these exam objectives. Same thing for troubleshooting and CPUs and networking and virtualization. All of those bullets are in here, and it's free to download. Even better, go to professormesser.com/objectives or type into your favorite search engine, CompTIA Exam Objectives. You can download those, make them available on all the systems you use. They're incredibly important. Make sure you are familiar with them. They could really be the difference between passing and not passing this exam. I've had a number of people come into our chat and say, I didn't pass today. And I would say, did you go through every bullet in the objectives? And they say, what are the objectives? What are you talking about? And then we have to explain. They tell you everything you need to know. And a lot of people think this is just a very broad overview of the exam, and I can understand why you might think that, because other certification providers like Microsoft and like Cisco don't give you this level of detail. They will simply give you a broad overview of a topic and not go into the specifics. CompTIA gives you the specifics, and you should absolutely take advantage of that if at all possible. Make sure you get those objectives. We do these study groups every month for every one of the courses on our site. Normally, we wait a couple of days, sometimes a week, before doing our next study group, but not this month. No, today we are recording this live on June the 6th, and I have a Core 2 study group tomorrow, June the 7th. So if you are someone studying for your Core 2 exam, or you'd just like to show up again and ask questions or answer questions, you can do it on tomorrow's group. And of course, next month on July 11th and July 13th, we're taking that July 4th week off. So make sure you come back on the 11th and 13th for our Core 1 and Core 2 study groups in July, where I'll have brand new questions for you. We'll have a brand new after show. All those new questions are coming. Make sure you put that on your calendar or add it to your favorite calendar using the links on our site at professormesser.com/calendar. Hopefully that's something you can focus on. Come back and join us for the next live stream. So although we're done with this first hour of Q&A, we're not done. We have an after show. Stick around for that one. Don't forget about our discounted vouchers at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, we have our course notes, our practice exams, and so much more on our website. Find out more at professormesser.com/1101success. And of course, you can follow us, join our Discord, check out our Instagram. It's all available. Simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the thing you would like to find, /Discord, /YouTube, /Twitter, whatever it happens to be. So hopefully you will have at least an idea of where you might be able to find us at any particular time. I can't run. I can't hide. I'm online. You can find us. We're always there. Someone is always willing to help. And our Discord, again, is a great community to go to. If you're someone who's interested in learning more about this, definitely visit our Discord. You may find that's the difference between passing this very particular and very involved set of exams for your A+. Well, stick around for our after show. Thank you for being here in the first hour. And we will see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay, let's take a sip. Let's bring up the stream side. So this is one where if you are following us or if you have followed us in these live streams for a while, you know that we like to ask questions in the second hour of the study group. I like to take questions from the chat room. And what I'm going to do here is bring up an option in the chat that I tried this on the last one. It worked okay. So we're going to see if it works okay again, where I can start a QA. So put your questions here. So at the top of your screen, you will see, if I can click on this, let's see if I can get to this connection. See if I can start it up. My problem is that I got to get this screen into a there we go. Start Q&A. There it is. So that's where you can put questions in. So it's a different area of the chat where you can simply put your questions in, and then I can flip back and forth between the live chat to see what all of these things might do. Hopefully that can be very straightforward for you as you're working through these. There were a number of activities that came through, of super chats that came through. I want to thank everyone that sent those through. I don't see them on my, normally it pops those up on my screen where I can summarize them and see a list of them that came through, but unfortunately in this case I can't. So I'm going to go back to the ones that at least I can click on. There were a few before this, and I apologize for folks that may have sent those in, but we'll get to those, and you're welcome to remind me about them as we go through this list. This is from Graveyard Grog, who says, super chat, $10 super chat, says, Messer, last time I was on here, I said I failed the 1001. Your course helped me. I passed the 1101 on May 23rd. Thank you. On to 1102. Congratulations on your Core 1. It's in the pocket now. You're good. Core 2, you may even find to be easier if you're someone familiar with Windows. Maybe that will help you as well. But I'm glad you stuck with it. I'm glad you stayed with these particular topics. Of course, the 1101 was an update to the 1001, so you probably had to do a little bit more studying in here too, but I think you'll find it's worth it. Those are incredibly important, so congratulations on that. I think those are always great stories when people say, yep, we did it, here's what we're doing, and here's what we're doing next. I'm glad you're jumping right into the Core 2 when everything's kind of fresh in your mind, so you go through the process. Some folks in the chat room are even asking now, if you take the 1101 and the 1102, do you have to buy 2 vouchers for that? You do. You need a separate voucher for each exam. So every time you sit for an exam, you need another voucher. And that's kind of the important part of the study process. It's the expensive part of the study process, is that you have to purchase that voucher every time you want to take an exam. You can purchase those vouchers directly on the CompTIA website and pay full price, or you can get discounted vouchers from my site at professormesser.com/vouchers if you happen to live in a United States or U.S. territory, or the United States or Canada, either one of those. Hopefully that's something you have seen and you've taken advantage of. It's all on the site. Those are good places to go. The vouchers, as people are saying in the chat room, are definitely not cheap. You're absolutely correct to be able to work through those. Chris asks, what is the best way to keep the cables from being confused in regards to pin count? I think if you're counting the pins in a cable, you're probably spending a little bit too much time on the details. And there's nothing in the exam objectives that ask you to memorize or know the pin count. I think recognizing a cable by look is important. I think recognizing an interface by the way it looks is important. Sometimes the pin count can help you understand what interface it happens to be. For example, one of the older style serial interfaces we often refer to as a DB9, and that 9 number refers to the number of pins that are in that connector. But we've really gotten away from worrying about how many pins happen to be or how many wires happen to be in a cable. The pin counts are relatively unimportant. Have you even counted the number of pins in HDMI? Who cares how many pins there are? The important part is that you have an HDMI connector and that you have an HDMI cable that you can use to connect these devices together. The number of pins inside is relatively unimportant. So don't spend too much time on unnecessary details. A lot of people ask me about how do I memorize the number of pins in a memory module. I didn't memorize number of pins in a memory module. I'm not sure why you would want to do that anyway. The modules are usually defined by type, a DDR2, a DDR3, a DDR4, a DDR5. That it determines whether it will fit into a slot or not. But of course, you have to make sure you get all of the right options in those too. But I think that's one that I think people will run into and they worry too much about. There's even folks in the chat room. Yeah, 19 pins for HDMI, 21 for USB-C. Is it? Who knows? Who cares? CompTIA doesn't, and you shouldn't either. Unnecessary. And as people in the chat room are saying, a lot of study materials include the pin counts. Yes, you should probably rethink the study materials you're using if it's asking you about pin counts. I think that goes back to the days of the 601 exam, maybe even before that. So we're talking about exams from 10 to 15 years ago. They're still trying to present you as if that was content that's on a latest version of the exam. It's not. In fact, it's probably just questions that they left in there that are still in the test systems that they're using. They didn't bother to edit them. Oh, well. That's sort of an unusual situation, but that's what you would run into. Let's go to some of the other questions on here. Again, we have that questions link at the top. A lot of you popped in questions and putting them there. So let's see if you're someone who is working through there, let's see if we can figure out the details of what you might be working through. I like this question because it sort of makes sense. Hey, how much is your electric bill? I'm glad you asked. It's a little bit. It's not as much as you might think. All these monitors are LED monitors, very low power, designed that way. Most of the time, only 2 of these are on anyway, along with the iPad, which also doesn't pull much power. This laptop's normally not used. So when we're not streaming live, it's not as much as you might think. It's just the same as you having your computer on at home with 2 monitors. That's really what it is. So it's not as bad as you would think, which is really great. When we started this, we didn't have LED lighting. You had to use some type of incandescent or fluorescent in most cases, because fluorescent was at least not as hot to use, but they still put out quite a bit of heat. It's nice having these cooler LED panels, plus use so much less power. So a good question, but fortunately don't have to worry about that. Let's talk about the A+ exam. And once you've passed it, the question here asks, what job titles can I look forward to after passing the A+ certification? I think if you look at job postings that are out there, I think a lot of the job postings really focus on what you know about the fundamentals. And it's usually for an entry-level position in the IT department. It might be, a lot of the times we say that's help desk, but it doesn't have to be help desk. It could be an entry-level position dealing with desktop administration. It might be an entry-level position dealing with break fix for hardware. One of my first jobs in technology was to hop in my car every day and drive from customer to customer to customer. I was a field service technician, and I would drive to a customer and fix whatever problem they had or upgrade whatever hardware they were upgrading. So I'd check in the morning. I'd grab a list of all the places I needed to go. I'd grab the cables or the memory upgrades or the storage drive upgrades or whatever I needed to take with me. Maybe it was a motherboard replacement for a warranty repair. And I'd hop in my car and off I go. And the first place I'd go, I'd swap the motherboard. Go to the next place, I would replace the memory. Go to the next place, I would upgrade the storage drive. So those are really good examples of being able to have an entry-level position that was really based on the knowledge you really received from an A+ cert. So that's what you should be looking for. Look to see what jobs are out there that are asking for an A+ certification. I have a video, it's in the YouTube video description of this video on how to get a job in IT with no experience, where I talk about this, about how you find these jobs, where you can search for these jobs, and what is the process for gathering intel or information about what jobs might be out there and what types of certifications they might be looking for. That might be very useful to you as well. I highly recommend you look at that video. It's a 30-minute video. I realize that's a lifetime in the world of a YouTube video, but it is constant information. As with all of my videos, if you've watched any of my training videos, there's no moments where you can take a breath. It's just constant flow of data by design, because we have very little time during the day. We have a lot of information to go through, and I want to present it to you as quickly as possible, but as succinct and directed as possible, that gives you exactly what you need to know, but doesn't go overboard in the details. And I think that video does a good job of doing that for jobs. I think that's a good place to go. So definitely something you should look at. Maybe that's something that can help you too. Other questions that are coming up. Let's have a look at some that are in there. Some other folks are asking about some of the things that we have on our site, asking specifically about our course notes. I think I saw a question about that. If I purchase your notes, in what format will I receive them? Everything that is my notes is in a PDF format. Everything I publish is in a PDF format, so that's available. So if you're getting something that's digital, it's PDF. If you're getting the physical, obviously it's a printed book, full color, perfect bound, which is a kind of a soft copy bound view of the binding. But it is a high quality printed book or PDF if you're using it online. So that's the format you will get it in. I do not publish the slideware versions of these. You would get them in that PDF format, that collapsed PDF format, which I think is a little easier to manage if you're someone trying to work through all of those. Let's keep going with the questions that came in earlier. Again, there's that questions link at the top of the page. I think that'd be a good place to start. This is a broad question, but I think it's a good one to talk about, from Easy, who asks, what's the most challenging part of working in IT? IT is a very unique environment in many ways because you are never done learning. You know, if you get a job working with a particular, maybe you work in HVAC repair, maybe you're doing accounting, maybe you work with medicine. There's certain things you need to know to work in those environments. You need to, for instance, know how, if you work in medicine, how do you draw blood from someone? It's a certain process that you go through during the blood. We've all had this done. We go to the doctor for our annual checkup and they draw blood from you. And it's exactly the same thing every time. In your lifetime, we've really not changed the process that's used to draw blood. And once you learn it, you know it for the lifetime of your career. IT is not like that in many scenarios, and in most cases, because you learn something, but then under your feet, the entire industry is changing. Things are happening all the time. You know, when I started in IT, there was no cloud computing. When I started in IT, there was no internet, at least no public internet to really pull from, not like we have today. So these newer technologies will constantly be evolving. Security will be evolving. Networking will be evolving. Operating systems, technologies themselves. Even yesterday, Apple introduced a new hardware platform that is changing what they're doing. So now we have a whole new set of things we have to learn. How do we secure that? How do we protect it? How do we maintain it? How do we upgrade it? What do we connect it to? All of those now I have to learn. So you're always constantly learning. If I had to decide what the most challenging part of IT is, I think that's really it for many people, because some people get into IT and don't realize, oh, wait, I have to keep reading. I have to keep getting more certs. I have to keep moving up. And if you want to do well in IT, you want to do well with salaries, you want to continue growing in your jobs, you're going to need to do that. So it's constant process of really making sure you stay up to date with the latest in the industry. This is a good question because I think it speaks back to what we were talking about with objectives. The question is, do I need to memorize, and in this case, the question asks both Ethernet cable colors, but just fill in the blank. Do I need to memorize this topic? And I think if you're in a situation where you're trying to figure that out, you need to go back to the exam objectives. This is the answer I have for everything, is the exam objectives. So I'm going to bring up on my screen the objectives, and we're going to have a look at the different things that are in here just so you can see it. So this is the core one objectives, the 220.11.01, and I'm going to scroll, keep scrolling through. I'm going to go to section 2, which is the networking section. There it is. And in the networking section, there's information here about all the ports we need to know. Section 2.2 is common networking hardware, so power over Ethernet and firewalls and routers and switches and that type of thing. Wireless networking, all the things we need to know for wireless. Section 2.4 summarizes the services provided by networked hosts, so DHCP servers and load balancers and proxies and that type of thing. 2.5 is SOHO networks, small office, home office. We've got common network configurations, especially DNS settings. Those can be annoying and important. You've got internet connection types, networking tools, and now you're through into the hardware section. So you might read through that and think, okay, there's no mention of 568A and 568B color types. I'm in the clear as far as networks are concerned. Oh, wait, there's a section on hardware right after this. And in that hardware section, in section 3.1, there is an option for network cables. And in the network cable section, T568A, T568B. So that is where we need to understand what those are. And if they're mentioning this as T568A and T568B, that by definition is a standard for wire colors. So if they're asking about those two, they're obviously asking about the wire colors associated with those particular pinouts when you're using an Ethernet cable. So that is where you should always go to answer those questions. I think that's incredibly important that you have these exam objectives. And I think that was a very good example of how I could show that to you. So you could see that. Here's a common question. Could we answer the rest of the Socrative questions? One of the things you may have noticed in Socrative is we go up to a certain number, but Socrative tells you, wait, there's more questions, and you never see those on a live stream. And that's because we do an hour of questions and then we go to the after show. So I write a bunch of questions up. And so the questions we didn't get to this month, we get to next month. So that's why those are there. So I always write ahead. I never know what's going to happen on a live stream either. We may need to have some additional questions for some reason. That's why they happen to be in there. But no, you can't see them yet. Wait until next month. At least that's something that can help you. This is a question, kind of a workplace question, but I think it's a good one to mention. What type of attire is generally acceptable as an IT professional? This is something that I think we can have a good argument about because I have my own philosophy of attire in the workplace. When I started in IT, I wore a tie. When I started with my field service was a tie, a shirt and tie. Most of the time, not a jacket, but I was a field service in Miami. So let's not go crazy with the jackets. It's hot enough already. And it's more of a casual role. You're also pulling in a lot of equipment and working with a lot of things. So that's what I wore. I wore slacks and a shirt and a tie. That was it. When I got my first corporate job, the corporate job was one where I needed to wear more of a suit jacket and a tie. It was a financial organization. It was an insurance company. And financial organizations love for you to wear ties. They love for you to dress up, at least at the time. And so that's what we did. I think as time has gone on, as the industry has matured, as people have gotten a better understanding of what we do, and the fact that we don't tend to be, in many cases, in a customer-facing role, I think a lot of organizations have gone more to a casual type of business casual. So slacks and a shirt with no tie. Maybe slacks and a polo with no tie, or sports shirt like this one with no tie. I think you'd be fine. There are some organizations that still want people to wear ties. Those are few and far between these days, it seems. And I think more and more, especially in environments where you're working in a data center, you're working in a place where you have to lift things and move them around, those places might even allow you to wear jeans or some other type of more casual wear that's a little more comfortable. So we've gotten a lot more flexible through the years for IT, but I think business casual is probably the most common one. I've gone to thousands of different locations, thousands of different companies, and some of them are Fortune 100 companies, sometimes Fortune 10 companies. Some of them are just small companies that are manufacturing or transportation or other types of facilities. I've gone into power companies. I've gone into car manufacturers. I've gone into breweries, and pretty much everybody is dressed the same. Casual slacks, a polo or a button-down shirt, or any type of business casual, and I think you're fine. Not too unusual these days. If you're going in for an interview, it's a little bit different. I would say for an interview, it's probably, we're not at the point anymore where people expect you to show up in a suit during an interview, but it can't hurt. I think a lot of people think that you should never show up in a suit in an interview, and I'm not sure that's entirely true, but I will say that somewhere in the middle usually works fine. I think if you're a male and you're walking in and you're in business casual, or female in business casual is pretty much where you should be. If I was going to walk in for an interview today, I would probably wear slacks, a button-down shirt, and maybe a blue sports coat, something like that, which is not overly formal. I'm not wearing a tie, but it's formal enough to let you know that I think this is an important meeting. And that's the impression you need to be making. Is this important for me? And for an interview, obviously, this is important. You need to let the person on the other end of the table, the other side of the table, know that this is an important event for you. You should be dressed better than they are. You should be walking in the door. You're not in a tuxedo, but you are dressed nicely. So that's another thing I think is important. We don't spend enough time talking about that, but that can be the difference between you getting that job and not getting the job, is how you dressed for that interview. People look at these things. That's why it's important to keep that in mind. Let me quickly slide through the live chat real good, see what's there. A lot of folks that are in our chat working through this. Again, we have the link at the top where you can put questions in. I should probably stop saying that because I probably have more questions here than I will be able to go through, but we'll keep going there. We'll keep going down and working through those. Let's go to our list of questions. Next on our list, there's such good questions in here. I want to get through every single one of them, and I can't, but I'm going to definitely get through some of these. This is a good one because it talks about the exam process. Hey, Prof, should I focus on the incorrectly answered question topics if I failed the exam? Well, nobody likes failing an exam. I failed certification exams in my career. A lot of folks fail certification exams all the time, but you didn't fail the certification unless you just stop taking it. You only fail when you stop, when you quit. If you fail a certification exam, you study what you missed, you learn more about the topics that are on this exam, and you go take the certification exam again. No big deal. Nobody's dying. Nobody's life is at risk if you fail a certification exam. The only thing is you have to pay for the exam again. And in the big scheme of things, it's not a huge problem. When you go to take a CompTIA exam, and let's say you didn't pass the exam, you can log into your CompTIA account and look at your exam results. All exam results are available online. So occasionally I've had people recently say I was at my testing center and they didn't give me a piece of paper with my exam results when I left. Well, they don't have to. In fact, if they do it these days, it's really more of a courtesy, which is nice if your testing center does that. But They don't have to do that. And really, it's not necessary because everything is online. You can log into your CompTIA account and look at the exam results. Now, the exam results will not list the questions and answers. There's nothing on those set of exam results that has information that's directly from your exam, but they do tell you of the topics in the exam objectives, here's the topics you missed. So, in fact, let's go back to the exam objectives again. I'm going to pull up my list of objectives. And let's just take that place where we currently were in our objectives. So that section on T568A and 568B. Let's say on your exam, and this is a good one to use because I have, in our study groups, we've done this. And in my practice exams book, I ask you about this. I ask you about pinouts for 568A or 568B. So let's say you get a question that says, what are the pinouts for 568A? But let's say you don't know them and you get that question wrong. When you look at your exam results, it will say you missed one or more questions in section 3.1, explain basic cable types and their connectors, features, and purposes. You know, that helps you a little bit. And if you can think back to the exam and think, yeah, it was that 568A, 568B question I missed. I know which one it is. But there's so many topics in that single section that it could have been a question about SATA connectors. It could have been a question about a Molex connector. It could have been a question about plenum. We just don't know. And they don't tell you. So you only get kind of a high level perspective of what could have gone wrong during the exam. And unfortunately, that's all you get. But if you can remember the exam and take notes for yourself, when you walk out of the exam and you didn't pass, sit down right there. Maybe if you are outside of the center that you took the exam, or if you're at home, or if before you leave in your car, make some notes. Write down things that were on your exam that you just know you got wrong. That way you'll be able to kind of correlate back, because you'll start forgetting immediately. When you leave, you're driving, you're already now thinking, what am I going to get for dinner tonight? Oh, I got to stop off and pick up those things. Oh, I've got to sign a form. Let me stop by. You've already forgotten about the exam. So write those things down as quickly as possible so that you can reference those in the exam results. And that's going to help you next time as well. Again, these are great questions because I have a great answer for you. Does the A+ ask about OSI or Southbridge, Northbridge motherboard? Hardly see that in the current motherboards. Yep, it's not in the exam objectives either. Always go to the exam objectives. If you're taking a practice exam, they're asking you about the Northbridge, or they're asking you about an OSI model, not a good set of questions. You can throw those out. Go get some good questions. You won't have to deal with that. Let's see some other questions that have come in. Let's have a look at these. Other questions. Here's a good one. Mike asks, do you use a VPN? I'm glad you asked. So let's talk about our sponsor today. No, I don't have a VPN sponsor. We don't do that here. There's enough of that everywhere else, isn't there? I do, on occasion, find a need to use a VPN. Most of the time I'm in here, there's no VPN necessary for what I do inside of this room. But when I leave the room, I'm staying in a hotel, I'm at a different location. There's a lot of different options available. And there's a lot of really free VPNs out there you could use. I think a really good example is 1.1.1.1. I think that's a really good one. That's from the folks at Cloudflare. That one is one you can load up on your mobile phone. You click a button, now you're on a VPN. That quick, that easy. VPNs are incredibly useful in the right scenarios. But if you find that you need to have a third-party VPN for whatever reason, a lot of third-party VPNs, there's a lot of good ones out there. And I'm not in any particular place where I can recommend or not recommend any particular one of those, probably because most of the time I'm just using something like 1.1.1.1. I think that's a good one to go through. And that tends to work okay for the things I need it for. But most of the time, everything I'm doing is encrypted already. So I feel pretty safe there. It's just when I leave the room, I'm in a hotel, that may be a good place to enable that capability. Another good question about exams. This is a good one that asks, hello, Professor Messer. I want to know, when taking CompTIA exams, do PBQs, those are the performance-based questions, those carry more marks since you have to provide multiple answers? And the answer to this is we don't know. We will never know. CompTIA does not share their grading systems with us. We don't know if performance-based questions carry more points or fewer points than a multiple choice-based question. We do know that every question is worth a different number of points. That's pretty much all we know. And CompTIA doesn't tell us anything else. We have gotten very qualified reports from test takers that have gone through and taken the exams and gone through every multiple choice question, but ended up not having enough time to even answer any of their performance-based questions, and they still passed the exam, which for a lot of people, they aren't quite sure how that works out, because for many folks, they spend so much of their energy and time and effort on those first handful of performance-based questions that they, at least in their mind, I think they believe that this must be the bulk of the exam because I'm spending so much of my cycles thinking about them. But in reality, as we found, you could miss every single one of them and still pass the exam. Now, I don't recommend that. Don't go into the exam thinking, well, I'm not even going to answer those then. If other people can pass, why should I answer them? That's probably that's not your takeaway. That is not the moral to this story. You need to take and answer those questions, but there have been people who have not and still ended up earning their certification. So we don't know. I would like to think that they probably are worth more than a multiple choice based question, but maybe they aren't. We just don't know, and we will never know. So I'm happy to give you a qualified I don't know in that scenario. That's sort of not a great answer, but I'm afraid that's all I got. That's the only one I can really help you with. We just don't know. And I think that's by design, right? I think if you're someone who is trying to work on, I think, the exam itself and focus on the exam, don't worry about the grading. Don't try to calculate how many questions do I get right, how many questions do I get wrong. Let's assume that the performance-based questions are worth this number of points. It doesn't matter. You can go through that process in your mind of trying to rationalize the grading of the exam, but it's a lot of wasted cycles because you can never qualify or verify anything that you may have supposed about the grading system. So that's why I tell people don't try to figure it out. It's a waste of time. You will never figure it out. And let's even assume that you figured it out. How do you know you figured it out? There's no way to know. There's no way to qualify it. There's no way to go back and see if you got it right. So that's why I tell people, don't worry about it. The final score will figure out, it'll work its way out to be whatever the final score happens to be. You just need to be sure you can answer as many questions as you can with the correct response. And then the final score will turn out to be whatever the final score is. Don't worry about that part. Other questions. Let's keep going in our list of questions. I would like to answer a few of these. This is more of an inside baseball question, but I think it's worth asking. What broadcast software do you use? I thought it was OBS, but I'm not completely sure anymore. At one point, it was OBS. I was using some OBS. OBS is the broadcast software that you can use. You bring in video into a system, and you can manipulate that video and put titles on the screen and do different types of fades from one scene to another. Fantastic software, by the way. Works fabulously. I was using a type of capture software or capture card that worked perfectly with OBS, and it was really great. But it was very limiting because you had to have a separate computer. Now, in my studio, you may notice that there is on air up here in the upper left of me. That on air is the software that I'm using. That whole system that is here that shows here's what you're seeing, and here's a bunch of statistics, and here's metrics for the data rates and the caching that I have there. Decidedly not OBS. This is from the folks at Blackmagic. It is a piece of hardware. You can't see it. Let me see if I can get a light on it. Down here in the bottom right, you can kind of see there is this little image of the screen. You can barely see it because my mouse is over it. And there's my mouse. So right here is this tiny little screen that's here. That is a piece of hardware that is the broadcast system. So instead of having a separate computer running OBS, it's this tiny little broadcast box that they make, a streaming server. And so that's what I have running the live stream on. It's no longer OBS. Haven't used that in quite some time because it's just a purpose-built piece of hardware. I just click a button and go live, and it goes live. There is a piece of software that I can bring up. You can look over my shoulder as I do this because I don't want to give too much away. But this is the Blackmagic Web Presenter. So that's what I'm using, is this little box right here. And that box is the one that does all of the streaming for what we're doing. So I highly recommend it. It works fantastic. It is technically the Blackmagic Web Presenter 4K. I'm obviously not sending you 4K. You'll notice that option for 4K is not available in your video screen. That little cog wheel doesn't have 4K as an option, because if you send 4K to YouTube, the way this works, let's back up. The way this works is I send YouTube a video signal. YouTube takes that video signal, crunches it up into a lot of different types of video formats, and presents you with whatever format works best for whatever platform you're watching this on. So if you're on a desktop, you can run it at 1080p. If you're on a mobile device, maybe it's 720 or lower. But the point is that they take the video signal and they re-render it. They are processing that video signal, and that processing takes time. So the video you're seeing of me actually happens pretty quick. You're seeing me in about 10 seconds or less, because I'm running this at 1080p. If I ran this at 4K, 4K is 4 times the data of 1080p. So it's almost like having 4 separate 1080p streams running simultaneously. That doesn't take 10 seconds. It takes closer to 30 seconds for you to see that image. But we're having more of an interactive, especially in the first hour. I'm asking questions of you, and you would not even be voting on it until 30 seconds went by on my side, at which time I'm just having to kill time. So that's why I don't broadcast it at 4K. So a little behind the scenes of what we do here is that I keep it at 1080p because I can have very fast performance. You see the data very quickly after I send it. And I think for our interactivity, the interactive parts of this, I think it's pretty important. So that's why it's set up that way. So good question. It's kind of behind the scenes of what we do, but some people like to know what we're using in some of this content. If you want to see other things that are in the studio, you go to professormesser.com/studio or follow the studio link on the homepage, and you can see some of the other equipment. What mixer are we using? What is the camera we're using? What is the videos video mix that we're running? All of this content is there, everything listed, so you can learn more about those. This is a pretty good one. Now, this goes back a ways, but let's talk about this. I talked earlier about how my first job out of college was a field service technician. So I went to school at Florida State University. I got a degree in business management. And because at the time, there were not a lot of technology types of degrees you can get. They had computer science, and that was sort of it at the time. And I knew I didn't want to do programming, so I did not get a computer science degree. I went and got a business degree. But the business degree had no technology piece to it. But while I was in college, I worked at the computing center and at least learned a little bit about the technologies that they were using. Supercomputers, liquid nitrogen cooled supercomputers, chilled water cooled supercomputers and mainframe systems, large scale printing, plotting, tape drive interfaces, hard drive storage. I mean, just tons of different technologies. And so when I got out of college, one of my first jobs was working for a computer store in South Miami. And I was one of their field service technicians. The question asked, did they train you for a period or just leave you to the wolves? There was practically no training. There was some training specific to certain providers. For instance, at the time, Compaq was a big company that made PCs. There was a Compaq certification. There was also a certification for Acer was big at that time. Gateway was big at that time. Every company had their own cert process. And that's really why A+ turned out to be so popular, because these manufacturers didn't want to manage that. And you had to take a different certification for every single computer that you happen to support. That was crazy. And so they really didn't give us a lot of training. They said, here you go. We hired you because you said you could replace a cable, you could replace a hard drive, you could replace memory. And I could. I was already working with these technologies while I was in college. I got very familiar with Zenith computers, PCs, 286, 386 type systems back in the day. So I already knew my inside of the PC. I did get trained on those. I already knew how to replace memory. I knew how to swap out storage drives. I already knew how to replace motherboards because I was well versed in those systems. And so I just showed up and said, they go, oh, good. Replace this motherboard, add some memory, swap out the storage drive, go. And off I went. And they were nice enough to at least say, here's places you can learn more about these, and we'll bring in the folks from these manufacturers to even help you along a little more. So they continue to have more of a continued training for that particular job. It's just I didn't stay in that job very long. Being in South Florida and driving around the streets of South Florida every day it turned out to be about 6 to 9 months. It was 9 months, that first job. I stayed there as a field service technician for 9 months. And after 9 months, I was kind of done driving around South Florida. So I did get a job at a corporation at that point working at their service desk. But it was a great job. You learned a lot about driving in South Florida. It was a fun job to have. And it was one that kind of got everything started. But in many jobs, they do sort of send you to the wolves. It's up to you to figure out the details. But I told them, I already know how to do that. So they hired me specifically because I have a college degree and already knew these things. So go do that. The idea was they wouldn't have to train me a lot. So it worked out okay. I guess in that scenario, it worked out okay. Doesn't always work out okay. I've had jobs where they just sort of send you out and hope for the best and give you no training. And it does not work out as well as that. Training is so important in these types of jobs. The last half of my career, I worked for manufacturers. So I worked for Network General. I worked for Network Associates or McAfee. I worked for Palo Alto Networks. So I was working for the company that did the development work. They created the hardware. They built the systems to do this. And when you work for the company that makes those, they put you through extensive training. It's a huge part of your job is training because you're in front of the customers every day and the customers are asking you questions and you better know the answers when somebody asks you a question. And if you don't know the answer, you need to know how to not answer the question. Wait, how do you do that? How do you not answer a question? You say, I have no idea. Nobody's asked that question to me before. I don't know the answer to that one, but I do know the person who knows the answer to that one. Let me go back. I'll make a note of this. Let me send them a note when we're out of here. I'll get the answer back from them and I'll give you a call back tomorrow. That's how you answer. That's how you not answer a question, by the way. You say, I don't know, but I'll find out. And the great part about that is they've given you a question that's hard. They know it's a hard question. You don't know the question, so you're not giving them a lie. You're not making them, well, I'm glad you asked that. I think if you take the thing that's here and you plug it into this other thing, maybe they know if you don't know the answer. It's very easy to know if somebody doesn't know what they're talking about. So you don't do that. You just tell them straight up, I have no idea, but I know somebody who does, and I'll find out and let you know. Because in a job like that, in a job in IT, you will have questions presented to you every day that you won't know. How about that? It's almost expected that you will be asked questions about things that you don't know. So you need to become very good at not answering the question. And by very good, I mean you tell people, I don't know, never run into that question before, but I know exactly where to go to get your answer. So let me go, I'll make a note, I'll go get the answer, and I'll bring it back to you. That's all people really want. They don't want you to answer wrong either. So that's really good. I think that's incredibly important. More questions coming in the chat asking about, hey, is it important to know this? Hey, is it important to know that? Should I happen to know this thing? And with all of those questions, I'm not going to address every single one of them individually. The answer to all of them is go to the exam objectives. The exam objectives tell you everything you need to know. The exam rarely, if ever, deviates from these lists of questions. And even if it did deviate for one of them, one question, the rest of the exam comes directly from the exam objectives. And I say this very, very with a lot of confidence that if you know every bullet of the exam objectives, you will pass your exam. That's it. The objectives are that good. They stay that close to the exam. They should be your checklist. Just go through every bullet. Can you explain this topic to a third party? Can you explain it to yourself in the mirror? Check it off. Go to the next bullet. Can you explain that bullet to yourself? If you can't, circle that one. We'll come back to it. That's your checklist. Make sure you're familiar with it. Other questions. I think, let's see, other things people might be going through. Such good questions coming in. So let's see. Other ones we have here. I'm gonna quickly scroll through a couple of others that are on this list. I don't want to repeat anything that might be here. So hopefully this would be one to go through. I would like to, at least from the perspective of these questions, be nice to summarize these. So let's go through the list of these that happen to be there. One moment. Such good questions coming in, by the way. So good. So other questions. This is a pretty good one. It kind of focuses on a couple of different things. So I would like to kind of focus on this real quick. It's from Keith, who says, "Hello, Prof. I'm a computer science student. I aim to become an information security analyst. What does the career path look like for that?" That's a very broad title, information security analyst. I think that's anybody in IT. That could be any job, quite literally. So let's kind of look at this this perspective of this and kind of break down where this comes from IT. First thing is that you're challenged in IT in getting formal education. One of the things you'll notice is a lot of the colleges and universities do not have IT type of majors. There's not an information technology degree in most colleges and universities. You will find some that will have IT degrees, but even then, when I find a university or a college that has an IT degree, what it tends to be is a computer science degree with a couple of IT things thrown in there, which doesn't help either. Generally speaking, broadly speaking, in the world of technology, you have computer science on one side, you have IT on the other side. Those are two very different fields of study. Those are two very different areas of responsibility, and very rarely, if ever, in today's organizations, do those two parts of the organization fall over each other at all. There's very little overlap between computer science and information technology. Computer science, generally, broadly speaking, tends to focus on the development and creation of applications or hardware. So it's somebody who's building systems, they're building applications, they're writing code, they know about C++, they're understanding how to write code in to build out apps on the web. They're working with sort of the development process for the apps that we use, which is, of course, an incredibly important and interesting field of study if you're somebody who would like to be a programmer or a hardware developer. Computer science is the way you go. IT doesn't do any of that. IT doesn't write apps. IT doesn't deal with C++ or programming. IT is responsible for maintaining all of these applications, systems, data, and protecting all of the applications, systems, and data. We keep them up to date. We deploy them. We patch them. We make sure that people have access to them. We put them in our data centers. We deploy them in the cloud. We just make sure that all of these systems are working, which in itself is an incredibly complex and very involved set of tasks. The problem though, is that how do you get a 4-year degree in IT if there's nobody offering you a 4-year degree in IT? And therein lies your problem. What a lot of people will do is go get a computer science degree, even though it has nothing to do with IT. And then once they get out of school, they'll go get an IT job because the employers, all they can really ask for is some type of technical degree. And unfortunately, computer science happens to be it. It's an odd sort of catch-22 that we in the industry have made for ourselves, that it's very difficult to have to find the split. It's very difficult for somebody to understand that computer science is one thing and IT is the other. Now in IT, some of you will obviously get back to me and you'll say, but wait, in IT, we write scripts, we do programming. Okay, scripts are not programming. Scripts are scripts. Scripts are automation. Programming is when you're writing an app. At least let's categorize it that way for the purposes of this conversation. Is programming is you're writing an application for the web, for a mobile device, for something. You're building a very complex set of programs, and it's something that you don't get good at unless you spend all of your time over a series of years becoming familiar with that process. So IT is different. IT, we don't do that level of programming. Yes, we do write scripts. Yes, we do automation. We write Python scripts and batch files and PowerShell scripts and other automation functions, but that's not programming. That's scripting. It is a very different thing in its function, in its operation, in its learning. It's just very, very different from that perspective. So I tell people all the time, don't worry so much about that. For the purposes of your question, though, you're asking, okay, what does a career path look like for somebody who wants to work in information security? And I think that's the important part, and where a lot of people want to move is to the information security side. If you want to become someone who is working in IT security, then you want to become very familiar with operating systems. You need to become very familiar with networks. And of course, you need to layer on top of that healthy knowledge of security. Those things have to work together. That's why there's very rarely do we have a lot of situations where you have entry level into security, because the IT security side doesn't have a lot of entry level positions. There are some, but it's nowhere close to the number of positions that might be available if you already had a knowledge of operating systems and networks. So it's not, think of it this way, entry level into security is not the same as entry level into IT. At entry level in security, you have to know a little bit more than somebody who's just starting out on the help desk. And I think a lot of people think, well, entry level's entry level. What's the difference? There's a huge difference. And so I tell people all the time, don't put yourself in a position where you're studying up to be a programmer and then you decide, well, I really want to be in IT. Now, you're going to have to shift gears a little bit to make that happen. So don't put yourself in a position where that's going to be a problem. So learn as much as you can about operating systems, learn as much as you can about networks, and you'll be ready for IT security. I think that's a good place to start. Questions, more questions. Let's keep going on this. Other questions that come through. There were a couple of others that came through. There were a couple of questions this month that talked about someone who needed some type of extra help on the exam because they might have a condition that might give them a disadvantage when they go into the exam center. So if you have ADHD, if you're dyslexic, if you're hard of hearing, if you have problems with your sight, or you have anything else that could affect the test-taking process, there is a set of options available to you on the CompTIA site where you can explain the set of extra time that you might want to get. They will give you an extra block of time. I think it's 30 minutes if you happen to meet some of that criteria. It's listed out on the CompTIA website. Have a look at the registration process, and it's right there in the registration process for how you can apply to get these additional allowances on the certification exam that you take. Another one is if you're taking the exam and it's in a language other than your first known language, you can get extra time. So some of these can be really helpful if time is a concern, but it needs to be a legitimate concern. So it's something, they have a whole set of processes and procedures for that. Check the CompTIA website for more details there. Other folks in the chat are asking, hey, can we buy your notes book in our local store in your country? You cannot. They're only available on my website. They're not available through distributors or any other place online. You get them on professormesser.com, and I ship anywhere in the world. In the case of Ireland, which was mentioned specifically in a question here, we do have printers around the world. So if you're in Australia, it's printed locally. If you're in the Europe, or specifically the printer we have, I believe, is in the UK. So that's at least closer to Ireland than maybe printing somewhere else in the EU. So we do try to print at least somewhere geographically nearby. Of course, then we have to deal with shipping it, going through customs, making sure everything gets through okay. Generally, that works just fine. We never run into problems with that, but occasionally we do get a couple here and there that we might have to work through. Sometimes things don't move as fast as they were, but that was a real problem during the days of COVID and everybody being concerned that anything you look at is going to kill you. Now we realize, okay, it really wasn't as bad as perhaps somebody may have explained to us originally, or maybe it evolved into a form that is not as bad as it originally was. In either case, we're sort of back to normal with our shipping and receiving of different things through customs. So hopefully that works out a little better too. Statistics, man, it's a crazy world, isn't it? Other types of questions. Here's a question. I'm not sure if this one is referring specifically to multiple exam takes or the same or whatever it happens to be. But Oliver asks, are some exam questions recycled for people that retake the exam? The way the exam tends to work as far as the structure and setup of the questions is when you sit down and click go, it builds out the exam for you. It might even do it before then. But let's say you hit the go button, suddenly there are 90 questions available to you, 90 questions or less, because it's a maximum of 90. And within that exam on CompTIA exams, you can move to any question you want at any time. So as soon as the exam starts, you can move up to question 50, or you can go back to question 20, or you can go to question 90 and move back and forth and jump around to whatever question you like. Most people, I think, go one after the other all the way to the end. Some people skip over the performance-based questions and start with multiple choice and then come back to performance-based questions. That's the way I do it. But there's different ways to do it. But let's say you take an entire exam and then you don't do well. You don't get a passing score. And so you go back and you study, and then you take the exam again. The second time through will be a completely different exam. Well, a almost completely different exam. I mean, there is a very big pool of questions that is pulled from whenever you hit that start button. But it's certainly possible through statistics. We were just talking about stats. Here's stats again. Statistically, there's certainly a chance that you might get a duplicate question to one that you had originally, maybe even more than one question. But you should not, it will certainly not be the same exam that you got the first time, not even close. And there may be no questions on that exam that are duplicated. So that might happen too. Every question is different. Everybody gets a different set of questions. You never know what those are going to be, but that certainly can help if you're someone who's working down the road of, I'm taking the exam for a second time. Should I study the old questions? Well, you should study what you got wrong. And if you can remember a question you got wrong, that can certainly help you, but there's no guarantee that question will appear again on your next exam. And a very, very good chance it will not. So that's the way it works. You probably get another duplicate of something you knew, which is still good, right? Either way, you're getting good questions on that and working through it. And this is probably a pretty good place to go. I know there's a little text on the side here, but just ignore this over here. We'll worry about this. I got to get that one fixed. But the question asks, how do I know if I'm ready for the test? I've been studying for 3 months. I feel like I know everything, but I'm nervous. That's completely normal. I'm nervous every time I walk into a certification exam. Anxiety through the roof. I think it was last month or the month before we talked about anxiety on the exam and how things you can do in the exam itself to bring down the anxiety level, because that's what I go through every time I walk into the door to take an exam. Like I go that first question, I read the question, and I was it in a different language? I don't know what that was. Let's try reading it again. Nope, didn't comprehend a thing. Like I'm reading words, and they're words that I recognize, and I clearly see they're in a language I understand, but I have no idea what it's saying. And I kind of have to come down from that anxiety high. Like there's too much adrenaline running through the blood. So, okay, get in. Okay, now we can read the question and get into the exam. And about 10 minutes in, finally, I feel like I'm back to normal. I'm in the flow, and I'm reading questions and getting through the exam. That's 10 minutes sort of wasted. And I give you some ideas about before you start the exam, here's some things you can do for 10 minutes that they give you. You can read the candidate agreement. It's a good example. If you've ever taken these exams, the first thing they do is ask you to agree to a set of rules and regulations for the exam. You aren't going to cheat. You're not going to tell people what's on the exam. You're going to be a good person. Sign this and say yes. But you get like 15 minutes to read that and agree to it. Well, there's a great place to go. Sit there and read it. Or not. Just have it sit on the page. Have it sit on the screen. Just sort of wait for the exam, because now you're sitting. There's no one in the room, or the only people in the room are the other test takers. The proctor's now left the room. You could sit there. You can write on well, you can't really write on your board. Technically, you cannot write on your board until you start the exam. But you can sit there and read through the candidate agreement. You can scroll through, or not read it, just scroll through it. And just wait for the timer to stop. And then you can click go. And hopefully it's giving you some time to kind of get relaxed in the place, understand what's going on around you. You can hear the other person clicky-clacking on the keyboard. Maybe you've put in your earplugs. They give you, there's all these things they do at a testing center to make things better for you. And so that is another really good example of how you can use what's on the exam to make the exam experience better for you. And having that at the very beginning helps me get rid of the anxiety, kind of relax into where I am, and then I can jump into the exam and make those things happen. So taking an exam can be a stressful process. Hopefully that's given you some ideas of things that might help for you when looking through the exam and what's there. So I think that kind of covers, at least for the perspective of our study group, another hour of Q&A. Hopefully that's giving you some things to think about for your studies, for taking the exam itself, and things you might want to do after the fact as well. Maybe that's can help you with those too. I think that's a perfect place to kind of bring this study group to a close. But remember, we have our Core 2 study group tomorrow, which we never do, hardly ever, but we're doing one back to back. So come on back tomorrow at noon Eastern time. We'll do a Core 2 study group. I have brand new Core 2 questions for you, and we'll do an after show tomorrow, which is an unscheduled change. Well, it's now scheduled. It's on the list. And if you ever want to know when the next live event is going to be, or you want to know when this event is going to be tomorrow, go to the calendar, professormesser.com/calendar. And you can, of course, find the list on our Discord as well. We have an events channel on our Discord. I always keep those up to date so you know exactly when the next live event is going to be. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you being here and answering questions for us in the first hour, and even more importantly, asking the questions in the second hour. We could not do this without you. Thank you also for your ongoing support of our course notes, our practice exams, and all of the videos that we have online. Every time you watch a video, it helps us not only keep this whole thing going and moving forward, but hopefully giving you the information you need to pass your certification exams as well. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Check back in with us. We'll be in Discord for the rest of the day. Feel free to stop in there at professormesser.com/Discord. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Core 1 A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.